In 1929, the Great Wall Street crash sparked the infamous nationwide Great Depression, an event that changed the life of literally every American citizen. Dubuque was no exception, and for years the economy of Dubuque struggled along with the rest of the nation. 4 years later, in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office as President of the United States and created the Works Progress Administration. Shortly thereafter, a group of Dubuque businessmen visited the WPA and proposed using WPA funds to hire underemployed local workers to expand a large, albeit nascent park on the northeast edge of town. Returning home with $200,000, those men could not have known how great an impact they were about to have on the history and landscape of Dubuque.
So Eagle Point Park is one of the most architecturally significant sites in Dubuque. $200,000 were received by the Dubuque Park District that sparked this project. So once they received those dollars, they hired a young landscape architect named Alfred Caldwell from Chicago to come and spearhead the project.
In '32, he learns of this project in Dubuque. He gets an interview, comes over, sees the park the day before. My understanding is he spent most of the night drawing sketches of what he would do, interviewed the next day, and was hired.
Alfred Caldwell was a young scholar in the burgeoning Prairie School of Landscape Architecture, a brand new style championed by Frank Lloyd Wright and Jens Jensen. The main inspiration for Prairie School is using the landscape and horizon to motivate design.
So a lot of Prairie architecture is very horizontal, so the horizontal aspects of the building are very accentuated, and the vertical elements are kind of tucked away and hidden. So it gives this very long aspect to most of the buildings. They use lots of natural materials, rough-hewn stone and locally harvested wood, and those sorts of things are usually very prominently featured. The other key element is that the buildings are usually integrated right into the landscape. So, as is the case here at Eagle Point Park, the buildings kind of seem to grow or emerge out of the side of the hillside. Even though the buildings are clearly man-made, and this masonry and the stonework is often, is clearly laid by humans, there's a randomness and a general kind of serendipity to the way that the stonework is done that makes it look more natural and less kind of engineered or machined. So on my tours, I love to take people places like this because you really get to see the story of how these buildings are built in the first place. So beneath a lot of the stone that appears very naturalistic, like regular masonry, you can see that there's a poured-in-place reinforced concrete frame. But this is really a space that a lot of people, I think, don't visit. They don't see this kind of space, but really you can tell a lot of thought was put into it, how the tunnel was made, how these gigantic stones were put in place to appear random, but still kind of have that idea that it's an engineered, man-made space.
Caldwell's plans called for 3 buildings and a lily pond. To bring the project to life, 200 men were hired. The stone was mined a mile north, and the lumber was harvested on site.
So Caldwell designed this site. He called it a city and a garden. So there are 3 buildings that exist right now that he personally designed. And then throughout the park, there are several others that are inspired by the same architectural style, but Caldwell designed 3 buildings and a lily pond area that are all kind of connected together thematically as the central part of Eagle Point Park.
So they built the ledges over there in the park and then a lily pond. Well, they didn't just build a stone wall. The first thing they did was create a work of art on stabilizing the bluff.
So the lily pool itself is kind of the focal point of the landscape. But the way Caldwell designed it, as you enter the space, there's a series of different kind of natural terraces that you walk through going down into the space. And originally he had envisioned that there'd be native grasses and plants at the edge of each one of those terraces as you walk through that would almost create little rooms as you kind of walk down into this landscape. So each one of them would kind of be separated visually from the other ones down below. It's really an intentional echoing of the Mississippi River bluffs upon which the park itself is positioned.
The Lily Pond features waterfalls, groves of trees, a pool filled with koi fish, and special gathering spaces Caldwell dubbed council rings, meant for visitors to gather in nature for conversation and revelry, but still allow for separation from other park goers. With the Lily Pond in place, Caldwell turned the crew to his 3-building plan.
Caldwell envisioned these set of buildings as a city. You can look down here and see around, which is more like a community gathering place, a marketplace, a place to share ideas, is right there with these buildings that surround it. There's bathrooms, there's sports events with the tennis courts over there, there's restaurants, there's meeting rooms.
He meant for the buildings to be used in all 4 seasons. Fireplaces that would have warmed these buildings in the fall and the winter and the spring. We'll see outdoor verandas and terraces. There are shower houses and things that would have served tennis players at the nearby tennis courts and those sorts of things.
In only 18 months, Caldwell's crew built everything: the Lily Pond, the Indian Room, the Veranda Room, and the East and West building connected by the Promenade Bridge. While today Caldwell gets the credit, many of the interesting elements came from the laborers.
Well, because this was a works progress administration project, Alfred Caldwell was very interested in training. So rather than just grunt work or hard labor, he really wanted them to learn the craft of masonry, how to carve the stone, how to place the stone, and how to lay it in an artful manner.
In the one terrace room on the back side, I can show you stones that are all of a sudden odd shapes that sit in the wall. And in the Indian room, little pieces. Well, somebody found those and they all sat around and said, what do we do with this? You know? They didn't just put it in the wall, they found a beautiful creative way to use those pieces.
When Caldwell's crew finished its work on the Veranda building, the project was finished, and the city of Dubuque wasted no time firing Alfred Caldwell. While a remarkable architect, Caldwell was also quite a difficult person to work with. Following his work in Dubuque, Caldwell returned to Chicago, where he would go on to become an acclaimed landscape architect and create the heralded Alfred Caldwell Lily Pool in Lincoln Park.
So even compared to other work that Alfred Caldwell did in Chicago, he designed more buildings here. What I also love about these structures at Eagle Point Park, even though they're nationally famous, like 9-year-olds can just rent these for their birthday parties, right? The park just rents these out. So the fact that we have these extremely well-designed, famous structures that are still open and used by the public of Dubuque anytime they want is pretty remarkable.